Welcome, everybody, to today's event, Aizome Indigo Dyeing, the workshop visit and conversation with Higeta Tadashi. It is hosted by Japan House London. My name is Simon Wright, and I am Director of Programming at Japan House London. And today we are paying a very special visit to the dyeing workshop of Higeta Aizome in Mashiko in Tochigi Prefecture, which is also featured in Japan House's current gallery exhibition, Windowology, New Architectural Views from Japan. Before we start, I'd like to give you some brief information for those of you watching on Zoom. Please note that your microphone and webcam will be disabled for the entire duration of the event, but please do use the question and answer feature to type any questions for Higeta-san at any time throughout the session. If you don't want your name to be attached to your question, please check the option send anonymously. The questions will be collected by Japan House moderators and a selection will be answered live at the end of the event. We do hope that we will be able to get through as many as possible, but please forgive us if we're not able to answer all at the time. And please note that the contents of this event will be streamed live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn, where a recording will be archived later. So today's event is broadcast live from Japan and from the UK from two locations, Japan House London in the UK and Higeta Aizome Indigo Dyeing Studio in Mashiko, which is in Tochigi Prefecture. And shortly we will meet Higeta Tadashi, master craftsman of Aizome Indigo Dyeing. He is the 9th generation head of the Higeta Aizome workshop, and we will then receive a special tour of the workshop guided by Higeta-san himself, followed by live demonstrations of spinning and weaving. At the end of the event, there is an opportunity for guests to ask questions to Higeta-san, so please do send in your questions throughout the event. The Higeta family Aizome Indigo Dyeing Studio is thought to have been established in Mashiko early in the Kansei era, that is 1789 to 1801, which is at the end of the Edo period. The current head of the studio, Higeta Tadashi, was born in 1939 and trained under textile artist Yanagi Yoshitaka in Chofu from 1959 to 1963. He then succeeded his father, Higeta Hiroshi, who was born in 1909 and died in 2003. And his succession was in the running of the studio. While his father Hiroshi produced masterly stenciled dyed works, Higeta Tadashi, his successor and 9th generation head, has added weaving to the indigo dyeing techniques inherited from his predecessors and focuses his energies on both weaving and dyeing. He is involved in every process, from the growing of the cotton to spinning yarn, dyeing with indigo, and also the weaving. He revived the production of brown-coloured Mashiko cotton and still cultivates it and uses it in many of his works up until now. And following in the footsteps of his father, Higeta Tadashi received the Person of Cultural Merit recognition in 2018. He has also been featured in 2 exhibitions in Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art. These are Higeta Tadashi and Ethel Mere, that was in 2016, and Higeta Tadashi, Achieving New Heights Beyond His Father, which was opened last year and closed at the beginning of this year, only in 2022. This is the Higeta Aizome Indigo Dyeing Studio. It is also Higeta-san's home, and it is a 1-story wooden building of yosemune zukuri, a hipped roof style, with a thatched roof, and it was built at the end of the 18th century. The building is designated as a tangible cultural property of Tochigi Prefecture. The west part of the building is the indigo dyeing workshop, which has 72 dyeing vats. The ceiling is made of bamboo slats, and above it you can see the wooden beams and girders. And the east part holds a shop, a living room and a storage room, and the south part holds an okuzashiki, a back room. The 72 indigo fermentation vats are filled with leaves of Japanese indigo, that is Persicaria tinctoria, the plant used to produce indigo dye in its many different shades. So before we take a live tour of the workshop in Mashiko, where it is currently just past 8 o'clock in the evening, we'll show a short video showing the vat storage room during the day and part of the indigo dyeing process, which we unfortunately cannot see live. This video was produced by the Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art and was filmed by Itaya Hideki.
夏の中心は藍ですから、藍に対するこだわりは一番強いです。これで色は変わりますから。
I would now like to introduce our very special presenter today and guest at Japan House London, Mr. Higeta Tadashi. Higeta-san, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us today. It's an immense privilege. Bethan Jones will be our interpreter for today's event and participating off camera, and Ishikawa Airi, who has coordinated this tour, is filming as well with Higeta-san in Mashiko. I would like now to hand over to you, Higeta-san. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
はい、よろしくお願いします。
Thank you.
私のうちの仕事っていうのは紺屋と申します。紺屋、紺色の藍染めっていうことなんですけど、藍染めを業とする仕事で、残念ながら勝手は非常に盛んだった。どんな日本中 村でも町でもこの荒野という職業が存在したんですけど、今は皆さんご存知のように、医療に染められる色は、まあ、極端な言い方ですけど、100%、いわゆる合成染料、化学染料によって染められるようになりましたもんですから、残念ながら、かつて非常に盛んだったこの藍染め業も、非常に今、数が少なくなりつつありまして、割合長い伝統、特に日本の場合には、藍染めに依存する時代が長く続いたものですから、非常にレベルが高い藍染めが行われたかなという感じがします。
I am an indigo dyer, and once upon a time there would have been a dyer in every town and village in Japan. It was a very common job. But as you know, nowadays almost 100% of the dyes that are used to dye our clothing are chemical or synthetic dyes. So whereas we were once very common, there are now a lot fewer of us. And indigo dyeing has a long tradition in Japan and around the world, especially in Japan. For a long time, people were reliant on indigo dyeing for their clothing. And so I believe that we have a high level of indigo dyeing technique here.
この仕事場は、藍染めが日本で一番盛んだった江戸時代の後期に作られて、まあ、専門家の方たちの意見ですと、創業以来200年、ほとんど修理、改修の跡が見えないというんで、そのままの形で、まあ、200年使い続けてきた仕事場です。
This studio was set up at the end of the Edo period. That's around 200 years ago. And as far as I can tell, there don't seem to have been many repairs or renovations done. So it's largely as it was when it was first set up.
一番盛んだった頃っていうのは間違いなく江戸時代という日本の300年近い時代がありましたけど、その頃ようやく日本人が使う医療の中心が木綿、コットンですね、木綿になりましたもんですから、木綿と非常に相性のいい藍という染料が使われたのは、これ当たり前のことかなとは思います。
The Edo period, when this workshop was established, was when indigo dyeing was at its peak in Japan. The reason being that this is when Japanese people started to use cotton for their clothing, and indigo dye was very well suited to dyeing cotton.
一時期はですね、一番最盛期には日本人の医療の 80% は我々藍染めや荒野と言われるものが青い色に染めたっていう時代が続いて、そういうことで仕事のレベルも非常に上がって、今でもヨーロッパの方でジャパンブルーなんていう言葉が通用するくらい、非常に日本の藍染めは盛んだったです。この仕事場はその盛んだった頃の日本の田舎の藍染め屋として代表的な作りだと専門家の方たちが言ってられますね。
At one time, 80% of the clothing worn by Japanese people was dyed using indigo, and that led to a very high level of skill in indigo dyeing, so much so that the color even came to be called Japan blue. And this indigo dyeing studio, is really a typical example, according to the experts, of what a rural indigo dyeing studio would have looked like in the time when indigo dyeing was at its peak in Japan.
例えば明治の中頃日本に来られた日本名を小泉八雲、落下でヨハーンという方の書いた文章がよく皆さんに知られて残ってるんですけど、日本人は青い布を身につけ、小柄でいつも柔和に笑っているというような表現で、日本を紹介したのは、それがもう明治の中頃過ぎなもんですから、 大体一番最盛期は井戸の末期から明治の初期だと思うんですけど、明治いっぱいぐらいは非常に盛んな仕事であったなという気がいたします。
I think the peak of indigo dyeing was from the end of the Edo period to the Meiji period, and we can see that it was still incredibly popular right through the Meiji period if we look at the writings of Lafcadio Han, who visited Japan in the middle of the Meiji period and wrote that Japanese people were a small people, always smiling and always wearing blue.
ここを見ていただきたいんですけど、この4つの焼き物の大きい亀、藍亀というんですけど、設置埋まっておりまして、その中で、藍染めができるような状態に、する作業を藍を立てると言いますけど、これが立った状態。今、真ん中に泡がありますけど、これを我々の世界では藍の花と言いまして、発酵した後のあぶくという意味なんですけど、この形とか色とかで調子を見ます。
Here we have 4 of the indigo vats in the ground. This is where the indigo is turned into a dye. And these 4, we can see that the dye is ready. And we see that from this foam on the top that we call indigo flowers. It's the result of the fermentation process, and the shape and color of this foam tells us that the dye is ready.
染まる状態にするまでに、だいたい一般的には10日から2週間ぐらいかけます。そして初めてこの藍の花が咲いて染まる状態になって染めた藍の色っていうのは一つの見本でそこに飾ってありますけど、薄いブルーから繰り返すことによってだんだん少しずつ濃くなって、いわゆる藍染めの色のグラデーションになっております。
It takes between 10 and 14 days to get to this point where you see the flowers blooming on top of the dye. And then you can do a test dye. And depending on how many times you dye the fabric, the color will get gradually darker. So you go from the palest of blues right through to the darkest.
世界中で藍染めは長い歴史の中で行われてきましたけど、日本のある時期のこの藍染めの世界っていうのは、これは16色今染め分けておりますけど、江戸時代のある方は、この色の全部一番薄い色を亀の崎なんていう色の名前、色名ですね、をつけて、それから少しずつ日本の言葉で、青の色を表現しておりますけど、これは世界を調べてみても日本だけかなっていうくらい、非常に緻密な技術だったなっていう気がします。先輩たちがこういう仕事を残してきましたもんですから、我々も頑張ってその技術を少しでも追いかけていかないといけないなと思っております。
Indigo dyeing has a long history around the world, but in Japan we have here 16 shades of indigo. And in the Edo period, someone decided to name each of these shades. And as far as I'm aware, it's only in Japan that has been done. And hence only in Japan where we really have this level of precision in dyeing. My predecessors have left me these examples and these techniques, and I just have to do my best to replicate them.
それでこの色を染める、それじゃあ材料は何かと言いますと、大体世界で4種類の植物からインディカン、青く染まる成分を取り出しているんですけど、日本の場合には中国から韓国を経て日本に入ってきたと言われています。タデアイという植物がございますけど、タデ科の植物で、その葉っぱに含まれている青く染まる成分を利用したのが日本の藍染めです。これが畑に栽培したタデアイの 葉を乾燥した状態で、それをたくさん集めて、水を打って発酵を繰り返すことによって、ちょうど堆肥状みたいなものができました。これをすくもといって、今現在日本ではこの状態で使用しています。藍玉という言葉もありますが、今はこのすくもの状態で使っております。
There are four main types of plant that are used around the world for indigo dyeing. In Japan, we use this Persicaria tinctoria, which came to Japan from China via Korea. These are the dried leaves of the plant. The leaves are harvested, and then we add water and allow them to ferment to give us this compost-like material, which we call tsukumo, which is the basis of the indigo dye.
今、はい、このすくもを作る男は、今日本では四国の徳島県に5県っていうんですか、5人いるだけの状態なもんですから、非常に貴重なものとなりつつあります。
This is a very precious material, this tsukumo. Nowadays, there are only 5 places in Shikoku, in Tokushima, who actually produce this.
それからイギリスでベジタブルダイっていう言葉がございますけど、私は藍染めが主なんですけど、他の色もすべてベジタブルダイ、日本の言葉で草木染めなんていう表現をしますけど、昔の染めです。合成染料が化学染料がない頃の、いわゆる自然界から色を取り出した色の、これは絹のスカーフを染めたいろいろな色なんですけど。
I mostly dye using indigo, but I also dye other colors. And for these, I use what are known as vegetable dyes. So dyes from nature. The dyes that were used before chemical and synthetic dyes came along, and these are all silk scarves.
この色に関しては、このいわゆるベジタブルダイ、ナチュラルダイに関しては、私の密かに師匠としておる方は、イギリスのご婦人のエセル・メーレイというお方です。ウェーバーの方だったんですけど、アーツ&クラフトムーブメントの中心メンバーの一人だったんですけど、その方が表したベジタブルダイっていう本が、私どもにとっては、いわゆるバイブルになっております。
The person whom I really look up to when it comes to colors and vegetable dyes is the UK's Ethel Merry. A weaver, central member of the arts and craft movement. She wrote a book on vegetable dyes, and that book for me is my Bible.
大体自然界に全ての色の色素があるんですけど、一つどうしても探し出せないっていうんですか、ないんでしょうかね。グリーン、緑ですね。一番自然の界の植物は緑ってイメージありますけど、緑だけをきれいに染める材料がないんです。それなんで昔から緑の色だけは、黄色を染める染料はたくさんあります。素材はたくさんあります。それと藍のブルーのいわゆる薄い色から濃い色まで、それを合わせて、黄色を強くすれば黄緑の色になりますし、藍を、ブルーを強くすれば深緑になる。そういうことで、緑だけは昔からそういう染め方をしてきました。
Most colors can be found in nature. Most of the dyes that we need to produce different colors can be found in nature, but the one that has never been found is green. It's the most common color in nature, but there is nothing that we can use to actually create a green dye. So what we've always done to create the color green is to mix yellow. There are lots of yellow pigments in nature, and indigo which ranges right from light through to dark, and combine these two colors. More yellow gives a lighter green, more blue gives a darker green.
時間は大丈夫かな。
So now Higeta-san is moving to the neighboring building where he will give us demonstrations of both spinning and weaving. Higeta-san himself will give the demonstration of weaving and look at the materials and of the spinning, and the weaving will be presented by Imai Hisako, who has been weaving for 8 years now with Higeta-san in Mashiko. どうぞよろしくお願いします。
はい。さっきもお話ししましたけど、日本の藍染めが飛躍的に盛んになったのは、この木綿の道が日本で可能になったということなんですけど、今現在は残念ながら日本が我々の国が使うコットン、木綿は 100% 外国から輸入をするようになりましたけど、私はどうしても自分の国のというか、この益子という町での土地で栽培した綿を使いたいということで、少しですけど畑に毎年こういう和綿って言って日本製のこれは綿です。それからこちら珍しいんですけど、これは茶綿とかブラウンコットンとかいう色のついた綿をこの2種類作っております。これを糸に紡いで、布を織るというのを仕事の一つにしております。
As I said, indigo dyeing was really at its peak in Japan when clothes in Japan started to be made of cotton. Nowadays, almost 100% of the cotton used in Japan is imported, but I really wanted to use Japanese grown, in fact, Mashiko grown cotton in my work. So I started to grow it myself. And now I grow this white cotton and also a rare brown cotton. So I grow both of these, spin them into yarn, and then weave my own fabric.
ブラウンコットンの方はこのまま使うことが多いんです。これを色の茶色い色として糸に紡いでそのまま使うことが多いですけど、この白い綿はこれは綿のうち普通一般的には綿をこの白いまま糸に紡いで、それをいろいろな色に染めて布を織るっていうのが当たり前の方法なんですけど、ここ私のところでは綿のうちに染めて、例えばこう薄いブルーに染めて、赤を入れるとか、これは白を中心に薄いブルーとか茶色を入れていくとかっていうんで、混じり糸なんていう表現をして勝手に名前をつけてるんですけど、そういうことからこれを糸に紡ぐという方法で糸作りをしております。これはここの仕事場の特徴かなと思いますね。こうやります。
This brown cotton I would spin into a yarn and use as is. But normally the white cotton would be spun and then dyed and then woven. But what we do here is I like to dye the raw cotton as it is. So you can see here some examples that have been dyed blue with a mixture of red, or white with some blue and brown mixed in. I create this multicolored cotton, which I then spin into what I call mixed yarn. And I think that's something that's unique to this studio.
よろしいですか。糸で紡いだものがこういう状態になる。ちょっと分かりづらいでしょうかね。一本の糸に いろいろな色が入ってますんで、思わぬ効果、奥深さなんかも出る場合があるんで、このやり方をここしばらく力を入れてやっております。
This is the result of spinning some of this cotton with the mixture of colors. It gives a lovely mixed colored yarn, multicolored yarn, sometimes with an unexpected depth.
こういう糸を使って、今そこで機織りをしておりますので、どうぞご覧になってください。
And in a minute, we'll see an example of some of this multicolored yarn being woven.
どうしてるの？こういうことで糸を紡いでいきます。出来上がった糸を使って今度は機織り機にかけて布を織るっていうところまでやります。どうぞ。
So this is how I spin the yarn, and then that goes onto the loom to be woven.
混じり糸と称する横糸を使って今布の表現をしておりますけど。
The weft here is the mixed thread that I was just weaving, just spinning rather.
織物っていうのは原理原則はそれこそ何千年も前から一切変わっておりません。縦糸があって縦糸の間を横糸が通って初めて布が出来上がるっていう。
The basic technique of weaving hasn't changed for thousands of years. You have a warp and then a weft, which is
今
passed.
起きている織り方は平織りと言いまして織物の基本中の基本で平織りに始まって平織りに終わるっていうような言葉があるくらい最も大切な作業。
And this really is the most basic form of weaving.
一つのリズムをつけて、リズムを持ってこう持っていくと。それからさっき混じり糸っていうか、綿の打ち染める糸を使うって言ったけど、それが思わぬ効果を読んだりしますので、ちょっとご覧になっていただきたいと思います。
The weaver gets into a rhythm, and if you look more closely, you'll see the lovely effects that the mixed yarn creates.
これなんかは、茶綿の色をそのまま地色として使った。で自然のもんなもんですから、その年の気候によって、非常に茶色い色がクリーンになったり、ちょっと濁ったりっていうことがあるんで、そういう点では、いかにも自然相手の仕事だなっていうような気がいたします。
This piece uses the brown cotton, the natural color of that brown cotton. Because it is a natural product, the color varies from year to year depending on the weather. You might get a lovely clear brown or a more muddy brown. It always reminds me that I'm working with nature.
この地色の茶色なんかは私がずっと今までやってきた中でも非常に綺麗な色になったかなと思うのは、綿にとって気持ちのいい年、特に夏だったのかなっていうような気がするんですけど、少しずつ自然のもんなんで微妙に色が違ってきます。
This piece is the cleanest, most beautiful brown that I've produced so far, which tells me that that this summer was a particularly good year for cotton.
この辺も全部割合茶色い綿がメインなんですけど、この仕事場で全部折った、紡いで折った布です。
Most of these pieces use the brown cotton that I've spun and woven.
それと、日本の染めの技術で、ぜひ紹介したいのは、いわゆる型紙を使って文様を染め出す型染めという手法なんですけど、その元になる型紙がちょっと古いものがあるんでご覧いただきたいと思います。
One more technique I'd like to introduce is that of stencil dyeing, which has been a very popular technique in Japanese dyeing, and I have some very old stencil sheets here to show you.
これはちょうど100年ちょっと前に作られた。
This one is just over 100 years old.
こういう緻密なのから割合になんていうんですかね、ラフなものもいろいろあります。
There's a huge range of stencils from the very fine, detailed ones to the less detailed ones like this.
この技術は非常にハイレベルだなっていうような気がいたします。
This again, I think, is a very advanced skill that we have.
型紙はよろしいですか？
Did you get a good look at those stencils?
Thank you very much, Higeta-san. We've been privy to quite a lot of your studio, and that's immensely lucky of us. So thank you so much indeed. We will now move on to the question and answer session. So thank you very much, everybody, for putting in the questions in our question and answer. If you feel you have some more questions, please do put them in, and we will look through as much as possible. We'll just get sorted at the other end, and I think we're there. Okay. So this is a question from Heidi to you, Higeta-san. What do you find the most inspiring part of your work?
日田さんどうもありがとうございました。これか
こちら
ら
こそ。
ご覧の皆さんからの質問を、受けたいと思います。最初の質問ですが、ヒゲタさんのお仕事の中で一番インスピレーションになるところはどこでしょうか？
何とおっしゃった？
インスピレーション
イン
ですね。
スピレーション。どういうことだ？
どういうところから考えだったり、アイディアが。
ちょっとインスピレーションっていう言葉の捉え方がどうしたらいいのかな
It
と思いま
depends
す。
what you mean by inspiring, really. What
日本の言葉では。
普段は一番どこからアイディアをもらってきたりするとかそういう意味
そういう意味
ですか？
でのインスピレーションね。そうですね。やっぱり私の仕事っていうのは素材が一番大切かなと思いますので、いい素材を使いたい。特にどうしても手に入らないものは自分で作るっていうようなことで、さっきもお話したように畑に綿を栽培し、それから少しですけど藍の草も作ってるっていうようなことで、やっぱりそのものづくりとしての一番こだわるのは素材です。それがインスピレーションって言えばインスピレーションでしょうかね。
I don't know if this qualifies as inspiring, but the most important thing for me is the materials. I need to use good materials, and if I can't find good materials, then I'll try to make my own. As I said, I grow my own cotton, and I have tried to grow indigo as well. So that's my inspiration is the materials.
Thank you very much. You mentioned materials, and I'm going to look at there have been a couple of questions, which one from Penny and one from Susan, especially, which are asking about the vats. Could you please tell us about the temperature of the indigo baths, the vats? What temperature are they at?
次の質問ですが、
はい。
藍亀の温度は
はい。
何度なんでしょうかという質問です。
はい。だいたい25度を基準にしております。
I aim for 25 degrees.
25度 C。
25 degrees C.
だいたいそれですから、私どもの地区では、火が入るっていうか、温度を取るのが、そうですね、5ヶ月ぐらいは火が入ることになりますね。秋から春の初めまでは、その温度を取らないとうまく発酵が進まないということで。
For about 5 months of the year, from autumn through to early spring, in this part of Japan, they need to be heated to achieve that temperature.
To continue with that, about the vats, if we may, we have one question. Why are there so many vats? I think there are 72, aren't there, I think.
また亀の質問ですが、
はい。
確かに72個もあったと思うんですが、
はい。
どうしてこんなにたくさん必要ですかと質問です。
江戸時代にはさっきも向こうで話しましたけど、そのぐらい需要があって必要だったわけです。だいたい記録は残ってないんですけど、明治の初めぐらいまでフル稼働をしたかなと思うんですけど、それ以降はなかなか全部を使い切る時代っていうのは来なかったです。それくらい注文が多かったっていうことです。
Because when the studio was set up back in the Edo period, there was a lot of demand for indigo dyeing, and so we needed a lot of vats. I don't know exactly, but I believe that they were in full operation until the start of the Meiji period. But nowadays we don't use all of them.
Thank you very much. that was a question from Natalie, and we have another question as well about this dyeing process itself, and this is from Rob. What is the maximum number of dips that you would do for a piece of indigo dyeing, and in order to make it very, very dark?
はい、次の質問ですが、とても
はい。
濃い藍色を作るのに、
はい。
最大何回、その布とか
繰り返し
糸
ですよね。
を繰り返しますか？
糸の場合は、中干しという作業が入ります。中干しっていうのは、その日に、そうですね、例えば、7回か8回繰り返して染めて、それを一旦乾燥させます。そして次の日か、その次、翌々日にまた繰り返すっていうことで、そうですね、一番濃い色を、特別なお客さんの注文の時なんかはやることがあるんですけど、二重な数回染め重ねます。
To get the darkest colors, I would dip the thread 7 or 8 times, and then leave it to dry, and then the next day or the day after, go again. And if I'm making a particularly dark indigo as a special order, a custom dye, then I might dye it 20 something times.
Thank you very much. We have quite a few questions about the process, so I think we will continue on that theme. This is from Ellie. Higeta-san, does successive dipping strengthen the dyed fabric?
また、その染めるプロセスについてですが、
はい。
繰り返して染めることで生地自体がこう強くなることはありますか？
間違いなく木綿、動物性繊維ですね。例えば絹とか、絹は問題ないんですけど、ウール、日本の藍染めの場合には、ウールはちょっと繰り返して染めるとダメージを受けます。傷みます。逆に木綿、あるいは麻、いわゆる植物性繊維は丈夫になります。
Well, as opposed to wool, which if you dip it repeatedly, it gets damaged. Plant fibers like cotton and hemp do get stronger with dyeing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe we will have another one here about the indigo vats, the dyeing vats itself. This is from Alison. What do you use, Higeda-san, inside the vat as well as indigo? For example, to perhaps reduce the indigo and to make it alkaline.
その亀についてのもう一つ質問ですけれども、
はい。
その藍の葉と一緒に亀の中に何を入れますか？もしかしたらアルカリ性にする何かの素材とかに入ってると思う
一
んですが。
番オーソドックスなのは、灰ですね。木灰。木を模してできた灰が一番いいとされています。私のところも大体それを使っております。
The best and most orthodox thing to use is wood ash, and that's what we use.
Thank you very much. Should we move on now maybe to actually the stencils? And we have a question here from Amanda, but we've had several questions about stencils. Higeta-san, what a privilege to hear you speak and to see your extraordinary work, your workshop and your studio. So thank you very much. Is it possible to have a look at the stencils once more? What is the stencil made from and how was it cut? And was the pattern drawn first or was the pattern cut by eye?
型紙について、 たくさん質問が来てますが、まず、
はい。
この工房のご案内をどうもありがとうございますというおっしゃる方ですが、肩書きについては、型紙をもう一度見せていただけますかというお願いです。で、
はい。
その型紙は何からできていて、そしてこの模様に関しては、まず鉛筆か何かで描いてから切るのでしょうか、それとも目で見てただ切るだけなんでしょうかという質問です。
これはですね、素材は和紙です。日本の紙ですね。和紙に柿の渋をつけてより丈夫にします。柿渋っていうんですけど、丈夫にして、それからナイフでカッティングしていきます。伊勢型紙と、さっき見ていただいたのは伊勢型紙って言いますけど、明治38年に私のところで、購入したという記録が残っておりますね。それで、やっぱりこれだけ緻密な、これ着物の柄なんですけど、緻密なものですと、やっぱり下書きが当然必要になると思います。
This stencil is made of washi, Japanese paper, that's been strengthened with persimmon tannin. And then the design is cut with a knife. This one is known as an ise stencil. And we have a record of when it came here over 100 years ago. It's a kimono design. And of course, with a design as intricate as this, it would have been drawn first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have some questions here as well about the shades of indigo, if we may. So, Higeta-san, you spoke of 16 different shades of indigo. Do they have any specific names?
愛のグラデーションについても質問ですが、
はい。
16ものグラデーションがあるという話でしたが、それぞれに名前がついてるっていう話でした？
はい。これは江戸時代のある方が書き残した式名帳っていうんですか、色の名前があります。それで私なんかもよくその式名、これ古い江戸時代なんでだいぶ時代は経ってるんですけど、その方が感じた愛のグラデーションが16種類の色の名前として、残っておりますので、それを見ながらこんなもんかなっていうことで、うちでよく実験的に染めることがあります。みんな非常に、なんて言うんでしょうかね、我々、ちょっと話長くなりますけど、いわゆる田舎の荒野の世界ではなかったかなっていうような感じはします。っていうのは、いわゆる江戸荒野と江戸今夜、東京、今でいう東京の藍染屋の世界では、これちょっと難しい話になりますけど、江戸っ子という気象、江戸の人たちの、東京の人たちの独特の気象が言われますけど、その人たちが、ちょっと長くなってごめんなさいね。例えば、花田という藍の色の名前では重要な言葉があるんですけど、その次に少し濃い色にやっぱり花田という字を書いてるんです。それは花の田んぼと書いて花田と呼ばせる。その前の花田は糸辺に選挙の一票二票の票という字を書いて花田っていうんですけど、そういうことでね、なんてでしょうかね、一つの謝礼、みたいなことを感じまして、これは我々田舎の荒野の世界じゃないなといつも感じておりますけど、大変なテクニック、ハイテクニックです。
Yes, as I say, someone in the Edo period decided to name 16 shades of indigo. Now, that was a long time ago, but sometimes the names that they gave to these shades do resonate, and sometimes as an experiment I'll try to aim for what I think that exact shade was. But what I do think is that the person who named the shades was not a rural dyer like me. I think that they came from Edo, from Tokyo, and that they had a Tokyoite sensibility, because the names themselves are very intricate, and you might have the same name for two shades which are one shade along from each other, like Hanada, but the character used in that word is slightly different, implying a very slight difference in shade. And it's almost like a play on words, or a game that they've made for themselves in coming up with the names of these colors. And I always think that they didn't come from the sticks. They were Tokyoites.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have maybe time for just one last question or two, but we have something here, Higeta-san, from Linda Brassington. It's yes, you recognize the name indeed. Hello, Mr. Higeta. It is a pleasure to take a virtual tour of your studio. Working there in 2016 was the most influential experiences in my practice. I look forward to working with you again when restrictions begin to lift. Please, may I ask, what will be the future for your unique workshop? And how will this evocative building be preserved? And how might indigo continue to have relevance in contemporary textiles? And we can ask those questions again if necessary.
次の質問ですが、リンダ・ブラッシングトンさんからです。ご案内ありがとうございます。2016年に、ヒゲタさんと一緒に仕事できたことが私の、キャリアにおいて最も、有意義な体験でありましたと。で、ぜひまた、行けるようになったら、また一緒にぜひ、やりたいと思いますというコメントがありまして、そして質問ですが、ヒゲタさんの工房のこれからについて、教えてください。建物の保存はこれからどうなりますか？そして、藍染め自体は、現代のテクスタイルにおいてどのような、未来、どのようなこれからがあるのでしょうかと。
難しいご質問ですけど、私のところは、家業として、だいたい職人のうちですから、親から子へ、子から孫へみたいな感じで、家業として続いてきたんですけど、残念ながら、みんなそのうちの長男、私もこのうちの長男に生まれたのですから、まあ、言い悪いはあんまり考えないで後を継いできたんですけど、私は個人的に申し上げますと、女の子3人おりますけど、どの子か継いでくれるかなと思ったんですけど、みんな自分の道があると、自分の仕事、興味のあるものを職業として選びたいという方針なもんですから、私の代で終わると思います。それから藍染めについてのお話ですけど、これはやっぱり他の、例えばヨーロッパのウォードとか琉球藍とか、それからインド藍は多少わかりますけど、みんなそれぞれに、それから日本のタデ藍ですね、微妙に色目が違う、そういうことでも自然の奥深さみたいなのを感じるんで、なくなることはない。それから若い人がこの頃だいぶ興味を持ってくれてるんで、そういう方に期待をするほかないかなと思うんですけど、私の仕事場をどうするかっていうことまでは今のところ 毎日毎日がいっぱいいっぱいで考えてはいないんですけど、ただ、リンダさん前に、うちいらっしゃって、一緒に仕事した時に比べると、見ていただきたいのは、屋根を、かやぶきの屋根を全部吹き替えて、しばらく20年ぐらいは安心かなっていうような気はいたしております。長くなりました。
In terms of the future of the business, it's a family business. It's always been passed down from parent to child to grandchild, and I was the eldest son, so there wasn't much thought that went into it really. I naturally took over the studio, but for my part, I have 3 daughters, and I've thought about who might take over, but they've all expressed their own interests in in following their own paths, having their own jobs that they're interested in. So I fear that the studio may end with me. In terms of indigo dyeing itself, whether you think about woad in Europe or Ryukyu indigo or Indian indigo or the Japanese Persicaria tinctoria, um, they're all slightly different and they just go to show the depth of nature, and I don't think they'll disappear. And there are lots of young people who are interested in indigo dyeing, so my hopes rest with them. As for the building and the workshop itself, I'm too busy to think about it right now, to be honest. But Linda, when you came and worked with me, the difference now is that we've had the roof rethatched, and so that at least should last another 20 years or so.
Thank you very much. We don't have any time anymore, but I'd like to sneak one last question in. If we go to Mashiko, can we visit the workshop?
もう時間になりましたが、最後の質問をさせていただきます。マシコに、もし行ったら、ちょっと見学またさせていただけますか？
もちろんお待ちしてます。
Of course,
ぜ
I'm
ひ、
looking forward to seeing you here.
ぜひお立ち寄りください。
Please do visit.
That's wonderful, thank you. And I have to admit as well, I have been lucky enough to visit Higeta-san in Mashiko some years ago, and it truly is a very beautiful place. Mashiko, of course, is known for its ceramics, but I highly recommend a visit to see Higeta-san's studio in Mashiko. Thank you very much. That is, I'm afraid, all we've got time for. Thank you to Higeta Tadashi for your very generous offer to allow us to visit your studio and for you to have shared this time with us. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. Also, thank you to Imai Hisako, of course, to our interpreter, Bethan Jones, and to Ishikawa Airi, who has been coordinating this and also the filming. Thank you so much. And to Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art, who supported this event by providing images and the video of Higeta Aizome workshop. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to all of those of you who have joined us today, and you will receive a small feedback questionnaire by email for those of you who've taken part. Please do fill it in, as it will help us in the future. Our next our exhibition, our current exhibition, I should say, is Windowology, New Architectural Views from Japan. Please do come and visit at Japan House. That is until the 24th of April. Our next events, in conjunction with that, are the demonstration of tea, Windows on Tea, live Chado demonstrations by Tankokai UK. Those are held in Japan House, and they go until the 20th of April. We also have until the 24th of April various workshops using Japan House London worksheets. Please do visit if you have the opportunity. And our next exhibition is called Symbiosis, Living Island. And that starts on the 21st of May and runs until the 4th of September. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody who's joined us, but especially thank you very much, Higeta-san, for your generosity in sharing everything with us today. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
ありがとう。
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。